Keeselijk critique.
They start out by articulating into their counter-narrative of legalization now that allows them to stabilize. However, this is just a switching out of parts of the meta-narrative that still sustains the overall notion that legalization, the process of legality, is what determines what body should be in the first place. Rather than just saying we should appeal to counter-narratives of legalization or even be a part of that system, we should not even try and integrate ourselves. We should embrace an anti-social standpoint that never actually tries to address legalization, such as the act, because it always only reincorporates specific bodies that allow them to be known, as well as that more that will be in the one in our, and they say that we don't know what it's like a person to not be. However, that already presumes that you know our experience. Me and Chris are positioned in a precarious edge between being and not being, always given the promise of redemption through appeals to able-bodied normativity, but simultaneously always precariously close to failing to be that, to failing to live up to the standards that are imposed upon us, which causes internal self-hatred because we're never able to live up to the able-bodied standard. Just because we don't know what it's like not to be a citizen does not mean that we don't know what it's like to not be able-bodied, which is a distinct and unique form of oppression that can't just be co-opted. Nor does the fact that we don't talk about narratives well enough, nor do we show that we care more enough. This is all a normative standard that says here's how you care and here's how you show caring, which already includes the possibility that we do care. We just don't know how to demonstrate it. Just because you don't just assume that we don't give a shit because we're trying to engage, but as well as we will go over later on the criticism about how we're able to resolve, as well as bringing attention to these issues, which is not a form of apathy. They change back their apathy argument, as well as apathy involves a normative system. I am not able to show emotion very well, but that does not mean I'm not an overly emotional person all the fucking time. Just because I might not sound like it does not mean that I'm not feeling tons of things and feeling and listening to the story of your mother being deported, as well as even trying to understand the Spanish, but I can't. Don't assume this normative form of cognition about us, as well as they say that they're out-of-ground activism. I'm not really sure how that happens because it's just a counter-narrative legalization, which happens to be about debate. I'm not really sure the internal links between going out there and actually fighting against these structures, but we can certainly fight these structures in here, which means there's always an impact prioritization about what happens in debate first, as well as because we need to hold debate accountable to the fucked up way that it's functioning, as well as all of it. Their inclusion of subjugated knowledges. Disability is a form of subjugated knowledge, and us reading disability studies into debate as well is a form of it, trying to integrate more knowledges and trying to change up the system and hold accountable to the material realities that currently exist, to have multiple access needs that sometimes conflict with each other, such as the need for some people to speak faster, but some people also can't really understand and write that fast, which means that we always have to be weighing between these things to make identities accountable. There are often contradictions between identities that often hurt another person, which means that accessibility and disability studies is a key way to actually try and create and fight back these barriers to inaccessibilities by creating coalitions to try and fight these things onto ableism. Their first argument about how we're just trying to say that they're a meta-narrative and that should be abolished too. No, our argument is that you're just switching out parts of the meta-narrative. You still remain embedded within the ableist context that determines what some bodies should be and what other bodies are not. Just because you have a counter-narrative of legalization does not mean you are a counter-narrative against ableism. As well as the ACTA is propagating specific bodies being normally desirable and achievable. Rather than reform the way we govern bodies, we need to explore what bodies we think of as valuable in the first place. Ableism is more than just negative attitudes, barriers to people with disabilities. It transcends civil society, locates itself within knowledge. We must approach the question of epistemology before utilizing political structures and appealing to them. Ableism produces a particular kind of self or body as a corporeal standard by which we compare all others. This perfect species, typical body past those outside of the mold is the diminished state of being human. That's Campbell and 08. And their appeal of meta-narratives, counter-narratives remain embedded within the context of civil society, working to reject these things. But where we begin to address the psychological aversion to disability, to different bodies, we are focusing on law abstractions from a way that is always more than law. It's knowledge itself in the way that it positions disability in opposition to civilization and desire itself. And They make arguments about how dreaming requires a certain cognitive ability. One, there's not even a piece of evidence. It's a silly argument as well. It's an embodied form of knowledge. Currently, all of us do dream about things, which means that I think it's all right to use that specific notion of dreaming in order to actually relate to how we at times understand the world as well. As we will learn specifically that the metaphor of dreaming is not just something that you have to do when you're asleep, but the imagining of future possibilities that allows us to change the present by holding each other accountable in this space. They also argument that he makes an argument that the government does not have authority over him. That might be true, but that does not mean that they don't try and assert themselves, which means that the legalization process will still always be reasserted on that. They say that narratives are key and that we're not carried enough. You can classify the arguments over from the case debate about how carried enough is always a normative standard. I don't know how to show that I care, as well as the fact that we are still inserting narratives and different forms of activism by even talking about disability, by fighting negative notions of disability. That is inserting disability studies scholarship, because people, especially in debate, always think that disability is always already bad and that me and Chris aren't even fucking disabled because we are so appear to be so able-bodied, but that just normalizes and hides over specific things about how we always get told that, but despite the fact that we still have processing disorders, that we are autistic people that don't always get what's going on, which means that I'm not really sure how to insert these narratives, what form you want these narratives to take, but Everellus is probably the best thing that I've ever related to as a person because it represents how I think about the world, which to me is a form of a narrative. I'm not really sure what you mean by that or how I can more properly appeal to what you want me to be. And modernity has been marked by a civilizing tendency that promotes a clean and proper body as a standard by which all bodies are judged, a vacuous and fluid norm. This idea bodies always placed in juxtaposition to disability for not disabled people, short of their own corporeal feels, growing ability to reassure themselves that they are not one of the abject, they are not a person with a disability. This turns disabled people into repellent objects that understood the feelings are discussed, whether either by saving the person, removing the disability, or getting rid of the disabled person altogether. This disgust response to human variation causes things like the Holocaust, violent installation of persons with disabilities, and other violent projects that were the result of a society attempting to rid itself of the animal inside that disability represents. That's Houston 12. And this outweighs on a structural level because civilization positions itself always in opposition to disability, line for continual destruction with no one ever notices, which means all of their apathy arguments probably still apply to disability as well as, and these new additions also get applied onto other bodies. And historically, immigration policy has been limited by notions about genetic superiority. We like specific people to immigrate to the United States because we view them as being a good and desirable body. We want bodies to boost economic productivity, to contribute members of society, all of which dictate ability requirements to be allowed to immigrate. Laws like the 1907 Immigration Act limited the possibility of people with disabilities and other diseases from immigrating in the first place, which means that immigration is always better within an ableist context. And you can extend through Everellus in 14. We need to dream with disability studies. This allows us to insert disability studies scholarship into communities of form of activism that actively challenges and resists ableist norms. There are already groups living like this. Crips Occupy Wall Street, Society for Disability Studies, People of Color Collective, Crip Hop, and many more. This calls for accountability across multiple identities, from race to gender to class to disability. As we hold each other responsible for the harms that we often cause, we need to hold debate accountable, specifically looking to how our topic process is fucked up, from the inclusion of physician-assisted suicide, which already says that disabled people should kill because they're being killed, or because they're a drain on society, or they don't have dignity, or to the exclusion of immigration and black bodies as another form of the topic. We ensure better politics in this community by holding ourselves accountable to our space in here, rather than appealing to institutions out there. We need to talk about how debate itself propagates these specific norms. We need to think of community as an active verb that has always been inactive. We need to switch from unified fields of understanding community to stabilize, embrace the destruction of the fact that we can't always explicitly know who our community members are. And debate allows for a unique transformation community that undermines ableism, allows us to desire and dwell with disability. Disability is not experienced as a problem by everyone, nor is it a continuous thing. Reading disability into community stabilizes the ability to know who our community members are at any one point. It's always reshifting, never stable. This forms a crip community, a place where we can desire disability. That's Chandler and 12. Discrimination should never be something localizable, because that always already over-determines who our members are and who we should be able to relate to. We need to think about the fluidity of identities, the relationships between them before anything else. And the role of the ballot is vote for the team that provides the best study in ableism. You should read our two advocacies as text and determine what that text has to say about bodies and its relationship to the able-bodied imaginary. The act simply propagates a singular idea of strife or invested in homogenous and known other that is always already assumed as whole in opposition to disability. As a critic, you don't have the possibility of affecting policy, but you do have an effect on the way we perceive our own bodies as well as those around us. What type of bodies we can relate to and debate in our day-to-day lives? What our knowledge of the body says about the world? We can change the way you interact with disabled bodies, with black bodies, with feminine bodies, and multiplicity of bodies beyond that exists outside of the ableist norm by undermining it. And ableism produces a specific type of body as being desirable, includes as numerous things like sexism and racism. We'll bring it away. It was settled these processes and practices of the British based on lose one exhibits or values, particularly understanding what's everyone's body was relation with others, and many other species in the environment includes how it is being judged by other social charges and value promotes and abilities, able and local layers, but others and social race and sex and cats and ages, race, species, and adherent governments, no submission, propagatorship, continueship, the areas such as security, social cohesion, social policy, relationship among social groups and individuals, countries, market countries. Process.
What does the alt do to change the debate space?
Right? We hold each other accountable, right? So our instance of saying the app has some problematic things of it is an instance of us trying to hold people accountable.
How did you hold the 1AC accountable to something that we did?
I mean, the links will be in the 1NR, because we're obviously in a debate and we're going to probably say that you did do that.
Okay. Fair enough.
Can I just ask about this Holocaust argument because it popped up again? How does the functional reading of the 1AC lead to a condition whereby through some type of spillover acts like the Holocaust come into play in the real world?
Because it's a specific requirement of capabilities that allows us to say you do not match up to that, ergo your destruction is justified.
Is it really fair in this debate to suggest that the act of the 1AC does this, or that like larger constructs in different arenas?
No, we're definitely saying larger constructs, but like
so what's the point again, one
more
more time, of reading these arguments? Like why that? Why do we have to use the Holocaust language? Like,
I mean, because I think that language is just true.
Or is it true, or is it the most impacting, or like
no,
the most
no,
hyperbolic?
Because
like,
Hughes
oh, it's the Holocaust.
Hughes is literally like made my skin get goosebumps when I read it because it connected me to a history of people that had been killed before the Holocaust even happened. 200,000 non-verbal kids were killed, right? And I have a connection to that. And those practices carried over into the destruction of the Jews, right?
But didn't like the destruction of like all other types of people, like the Armenian genocide and those that came before them, also play into that destruction? I'm just trying to isolate why we have to keep saying
there
Holocaust,
might be,
Holocaust,
but like
Holocaust.
the Holocaust was specifically the practices used from the killing under Action T4 euthanasia, which is a German policy, got carried over into the exact same like gas chambers.
But this suggests like these are new ideas. Like you don't think that in like ancient societies they were killing off people because they weren't as able-bodied as others? I'm just saying like you've drawn a false link to appeal to a judge just to say like this is the Holocaust. And
no, we're not saying you are the Holocaust, right?
I get that,
so
but you're trying
point?
to use the Holocaust as a unique example of what we might be if we were in play in the real world, as opposed to looking at the structural underlyings of how that violence came to be beforehand.
Wait,
by
no,
suggesting
because that structural underlying violence is ableism.
We agree, but why does it have to be ableism tied to the construct of the Holocaust?
Because I mean, like it's an example, right? I suppose we could also
there
talk
are
about
numerous examples which
probably a way
bring
we
the same
can-
point.
Okay, I mean-
Why don't you talk about that? Why are you comparing this to the Holocaust?
Okay,
That's the question.
I mean, so maybe it's a bad comparison, but
No,
we're still
yeah,
articulating the impact of the mindset as well as we could talk about programs like, I'm trying to think, like testing on like black, like people, like the...
I have a question.
It's probably like a good way
Um,
to compare.
An immigrant dreams to have an opportunity over here in the United States. They get deported. What happens to their dream?
I mean, our dream is specific to debate.
I'm talking about their dream.
I mean, it looks like it's not realizable, which is really shitty.
So how does the alternative solve for those dreams?
Right, we articulate that you don't have solvency for out there.
That wasn't answering my question. I'm talking about how do those people get access to their dreams post the alternative? And I will take prep for that.
Okay, I mean, because we allow for activism, right? There are already numerous groups out there, such as Crip Hop, Disability Studies, People of Color Collective, which are examples of people actually fighting against ableist norms of body and saying, like, this is, like, what we want to do.
So a person of color is automatically a person who's not legal?
What? No.
So tell me why, that doesn't answer the question again. How do those people who are not legal get access to a dream if they've been deported?
I mean, I guess they can't.
Okay, thank you. We used